Right. Well, thanks everybody. It's been a little bit since we've seen each other, so well, I can't see anybody, but it's good to have everybody here tonight. Thanks for making the time again. So where we're going to start, I'm going to pull up the agenda real quick, just go over what we're going to look at. So what we're going to do, we're going to start tonight is obviously we've gone through and we've looked at some of the, as I mentioned in my last email, some of the more complicated structures that may be contributing or non-contributing, and also some just to generate discussion about maybe the design guidelines or zoning ordinance. And so now we've spent time compiling the lists of all the structures and all the information about each one of them. And so what we want to do now is slowly but not slowly but surely release the list in chunks to you guys, so that way you're seeing everything that is being potentially contributing or non-contributing, and then talk about the ones, any of them that you want to talk about. The ones that I asked everyone to check out specifically were the ones that were determined contributing in the National Register and that staff agreed with. So we haven't previously talked about those. To us, they did not fit the criteria to be considered contributing, and so we felt that was fine to go ahead and say that they were non-contributing. But we want to make sure as we review these lists and finalize them that you've seen them, and if you have any concerns or questions about the ones that are non-contributing, that we can try to address those here tonight. So like I said, we're starting with the first three streets, and then after that we'll go alphabetical order in the next meetings to determine those. So and please, if you have any questions at any point, let me know. And I'm assuming everybody can hear me because no one said anything, so I'm just going to keep on talking.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you guys see that spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So the first one I was
It's small to my aged eyes. Can you make it any bigger?
I sure can, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first one we're going to look at 3405 Cypress Drive. And I'll pull up the photo here. Just switch. Okay. Nope, there we go. Okay. And so this is 3405. Did anybody have any concerns or questions about this one as to why it was non-contributing?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I can't see. Well, I don't even know if there's any videos on, but yeah, if somebody could just let me know either yes or no, that's fine. And then the next one is 3406, which is this one. Any concerns or questions about why this one was non-contributing? Okay. We'll take that as a nope.
I can speak to that one.
Okay.
Well, yeah, why was it non-contributing? I mean, in the broad sense of modern, it fits. So.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones that was originally considered non-contributing in the National Register, and so we agreed kind of the changes. It's not like one thing has led to it. It's kind of all these additions and changes over the years, and so to us it doesn't meet the criteria that we're looking at. I can see how it does look modern, but it's kind of gone outside the scale of a Holmes Run Acres home.
Okay. Is that something though that when the Architectural Review Board is looking at, I mean, they're not going to look at just one structure, but when they're looking at the guidelines, like I would say if that had been on the National Register, like I would pass that as contributing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I could see it's kind of one of those ones I can understand kind of going both ways. So it is kind of one of those ones that's on the fence, but it's kind of that culmination of all the different changes over the years. So
It's hard to go back all the way on all the houses we have discussed, but my opinion, this is a lot more contributing than we have judged many others as being contributing.
I agree with Arvidas on that. I'm thinking of one on a couple of the ones on Hemlock, I think that we looked at that I would consider probably less contributing than this, although I completely appreciate, I mean, this is a deviation from materials and, you know, the massing is pretty large. So it gets back to this perennial question we have about, you know, are we talking modern? Are we talking Holmes run? And I understand that it's a tricky question to answer because our answer will directly impact the guidelines. So I don't have a brilliant solution for how to answer.
and I think that's why we're talking about all this, and I think that's helpful to hear because, like I said, I can see it both ways. And yes, it will affect what we end up putting in a potential zoning ordinance or design guidelines. So what I'll do for this one is I'll highlight it and I will review it again and kind of go back through all the permits and before we make any kind of further determination on this one.
Is it possible for a house to not be on the National Register, but we deem it contributing?
Yeah, there was one in one of our, I can't remember which meeting, because it was one that was originally determined non-contributing. And when I looked at it, and I was like, only a small addition. It doesn't seem to overwhelm it. You can definitely see all the features of a Holmes or an Acres home. And when we talked about it, you guys all agreed. And so, yeah, so that one, I can't remember off the top of my head what structure it was. That one I will have switched to contributing because I don't think it's, I mean, I think for the most part, obviously, because, you know, the folks that did the National Register nomination and then kind of what we're working under too is like we all kind of work under the same structure, right? Starting with information in the National Register, we use Secretary of Interior standards, and that's kind of what's ended up in the zoning ordinance for Fairfax County. So all historic preservation kind of funnels down that way. And so what we do is very similar. But yeah, we can change, we can have differences of opinions on some things for sure. So I'll add that one too. I'll go back and look at that one.
I have a question. I think this house was recently renovated, and I think this used to look like a Swiss chalet. So this would be an interesting example of how do you renovate a non-contributing structure, because this looks a lot better than what I'm seeing on Google Street View prior to the latest renovation. So I guess one consideration would be not necessarily comparing the renovation to what this house looked like originally 50 years ago, but compared to what it looked like 10 years ago.
Okay, I'll look at
Can I
that.
jump in, Nicole?
Yeah.
The Architecture Review Board is going to be reviewing all of the non-contributing structures. And this can go on the list as a positive non-contributing, a positive addition, changes that we like, and the board might approve in the future. But I just don't see Holmes Run Acre House in that anymore. And I think that's why Nicole's doing that. It's not that it's bad. It has no negative or positive. It's just that it has lost an element.
Yeah.
I guess the question I had in my mind is would this pass muster because this house was already non-contributing and more grossly non-contributing prior to the latest renovation? That is, would you want to, how would you, this is maybe not something you would want to have applied to a house that was intact, but to a house that already has had the cladding changed.
Yeah, and I think that's what Elise was kind of alluding to there was that, yeah, if it was, if there was a non-contributing structure and they wanted to put on some of these additions, like Elise just said, the ARB may be okay with it because you know, it's already non-contributing, and it does kind of fit the theme and the character of the neighborhood. And so it might work okay for because the additions like the shed roof and the, you know, the slope of the gable roof, everything is very similar. It's just all the additions over time have kind of lost the Holmes Run Acres home. And I think somebody else is about to pop in too. Is that you, Edith?
It is. So I was going to say, I think that this is an example of a house that would benefit from an architectural review board, because given the massing that they added to it, with a little bit of architectural insight, they could have changed just a little bit of the massing that would have articulated the original house a little bit more and made the additions a little subsidiary, and they wouldn't have lost a lot of square footage. So I think that's one example of if the architectural review board had been in place, you know, when they pulled this permit, there probably could have been a pretty simple back and forth that would have rendered it kind of obviously contributing. So I see that as a positive sign moving forward in favor of an HOD.
Yeah, no, that's a good description. So see, it helps having architects too.
Nicole,
Yeah.
Nicole, one good thing about this house is at least it has egress windows from bedroom that comply with the current code. Very many of our Homes on Acre houses that kept the original window configuration no longer comply. So, you know, those kind of ramifications, if you will, that are required now would make many houses look different if you did the right thing. So it's very difficult to make a hard and fast judgment whether this is a better way to do it or worse.
Arvidas, I think that I agree with what you're saying, but I will say there's a subtle difference actually between the Luria Gaddies and Bodors, because the Gaddy models that are walkout, the masonry opening does comply and the sill height does comply on a majority, well, at least the ones I've worked on. So sometimes it's just it's change, you know, change of the sash or something. But I agree on the Lurias. I think most of the ones that I've been in, they miss it by just an inch or a couple inches sometimes. So yeah, I think there are times when we have to make the changes just to bring the houses up to code. That being said, I think what we're all reacting to on this house is the general massing, not the individual windows, because I think we've already reviewed that. You know, we're okay. I think there was a house that we okayed the bay window on, which is completely not Homes Run Acres, but it just kind of worked for that house. So I think this might be sort of a different ball of wax.
Yeah, but I will take that the egress part in the code. That's a good point and something that we'll take into the thought process of how we're doing this. Let me just check. I'll see if there's like somebody in the chat. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the next one to look at, we're gonna look at 3412. Another one that was determined non-contributing in the National Register. This one here. Hard to see all of it. Oops. But I think if I zoom in a little bit, to us, this one, I mean, it's hard to say there's anything of a Holmes Run Acres house in there, so we didn't have any disagreement with that one. Anyone has any thoughts?
I see how they tried to keep it, but yeah, I agree. It's gone not too far. It's gone too high. that really makes it doesn't quite fit anymore. But
yeah.
Well, here's my 2 cents on this. Is I agree. You can't really see a Homes Run house in it. If we talk garden and old growth landscape, then you know I'd put this in the acceptable category. So this is this tricky thing about, you know, what's a mid-century modern home if you don't have the garden around it? Because if you take all the vegetation out of here to try to make it comply, I think that I don't know. I think then you'd have a different issue. So
yeah, and while the landscape and obviously how it's built into the landscape and the whole neighborhood is part of it. Like, since we can't regulate that specifically, it'll something that goes in the guidelines. That's why we can't really say, like, if this were to come, say there was just like a one-story area here, and they came in and this is what they wanted to do, and they were going to do some landscaping, the ARB has purview and can say yes or no to the building permit, and they will comment on the landscaping and the site plan, but they can't require them to do anything. And so that's kind of where that'll be, is that since we can't, it's a part of it, yes, but we can't require them. So for the HOD part of it, that's why we focus on the structures.
Understood. So I guess there's yeah, that's tricky because if you tear down all the green just to put up a contributing home, then you've sacrificed what makes it sort of a mid-century home for the neighbors, because without the green, our houses are kind of nothing. So, but I understand how do you regulate it.
And I think, and Elise can chime in too. Again, they would make recommendations, and they would probably push for all the landscaping to remain. And while they can't require it, they could probably have a longer conversation with whoever was coming in and kind of ask them to rethink their whole process and come back if that was a thing. I don't think we've ever really had anything where, I mean, obviously this is a different situation than most of our HODs, but yeah. And I think, was somebody else trying to pop in there too?
Okay. I was just asking how high that was. Is that really a 4-story? Is that really a 4-story building I'm looking at?
I think, I don't have let me see. Originally it was like a 1, I'm sorry, I switched my.
I think that's actually 3 stories or 2. They just have this like open, like part in the front there that I think it's where the staircase is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's kind of like just an open wall.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
a floor divider.
It just looks, I mean, I like the vegetation too, but it just looks too high. It's not Holmes Run. It's nice, but not Holmes Run.
Yeah. Okay. So next one is second. Sorry, I'm always on the tiniest of little computers. Okay, so that was all of them on Cypress that we hadn't talked about. So we're going to pop over to Elm Terrace, and this one will be 3324. There we go. So same kind of thing on this one. Obviously, the additions have kind of overwhelmed it over time, and it's hard to see where the Holmes Run Acres home is in this one. So we agreed with the non-contributing. So no thoughts? Pop over. Okay.
What street is this one?
This is Elm Terrace. So 3324 Elm Terrace. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to go to 3333 Elm Terrace. Okay. So this one too, I think probably it's similar in the fact that they enclose the carport, which obviously we've seen plenty of times, but then there's been a number of additions, and I think there is still kind of that, there's a little bit of the shape of the Holmes Run Acres house. I think that there's too many additions that have changed it to a point where it's not, I wouldn't say it's still significant or has the integrity of a Holmes Run Acres house. Any thoughts on this one?
This is like the really high one, and then I can totally see how they were like going with the spirit of Holmes Run. I could be on the fence on this one. I can see why some people would say no. But I do feel like it's in the spirit.
Say the same thing, is that I feel similarly, and I think it's also really important. This is a house where they couldn't go up and maybe follow more traditional lines because of the nature of the physical limitations of the residents. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah, and I think that's something that when, as we go through the process, especially with the design guidelines and stuff, which we'll talk about later tonight, that's something that will be taken into account by the ARB. So, because again, we want there to be flexibility. If there is an HOD, and obviously some of the structures are built into on slopes and landscapes, and the setbacks are not what you might want them to be able to build out where you want. And so that's something that the ARB would take into account if something like this were to come into for review. So,
I mean, they did a lot of things right. They kept the roof lines. They kept the proper slope. They got the overhangs. They kept it low. I mean, they did a lot of things right. I mean, I'm actually on the fence about this one as well.
I agree, and I think the scale is right for the neighborhood, just as it fits in well too with the landscape.
all right, add that to the list.
And the depth of the front pathway to the door is like, that's pretty unusual in Holmes Run, but I have seen houses that have like varying degrees of depth there for that. So this is probably the most extreme example. And having it centered, I don't know that I've seen that anywhere else, but it's not unprecedented.
I think one of the things you have to ask is, can you find the original home in here? And, for me, I always look for the chimney mass. So it looks to me like, I walk by this house a lot. I don't know, though. I'm guessing that they pulled all, the addition is all happening towards the front. That's probably where they have the largest room to grow, because it looks to me like, I can't tell if that's the original chimney mass back there, but I think that's one of the things that the ARB would probably look at is, can you find the original house in this, not just the typology or the.
From the street or in general? Because I suspect if we went on the back of this thing, we could find it.
I think from the street, because again, Jenny, our neighborhood is not, our historic registry is not per house, it's for the neighborhood. So it's an interesting question with the HOD, if that's the prominent side that we're addressing, which I think it is.
Yeah, so usually, as Edith was alluding to, usually in historic districts, it's usually the street facing side. That tends to be the significant elevation or side of the building that has the architecture that would be considered significant. We've kind of run into that with Holland Hills, because there are some that the street facing side is super tiny, and that's where they put the additions, because again, they weren't able to add on to the back, and the back or all other three sides are perfectly intact. And that is where you see the main windows and the main roof slope and kind of the significant features of it. So I think that's a good question. It feels like for the most part, Holmes Run Acres is a little bit different than that. And so it's something that's a good question, though. That's one of these ones we could possibly add to the list to get photos all the way around. Because if there are, again, from this side and from, I think what it says in the permits, there's a lot of additions. So I'm not sure it would matter, but I'll add that and just see if there's if we saw the other three sides, say all the other, it looks like there's all those additions on the sides. I don't think it
would. Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
The standard is usually what can be seen from the public right of way.
Mm-hmm.
And in Holmes Run Acres, there's a lot of parkland behind their houses, which, in Holland Hills, there's a lot of parkland behind their houses. So that can be seen from the public right of way. And there's a lot of corner lots. You don't have the parkland issue here.
No, but we have talked in the past about being concerned about what your neighbors see, because the lots are all open to each other. And so if they hadn't built out on the front, then they'd have built out on the back or the side, and then it would have potentially disrupted some other neighbor's view. So I think like the full 360 in HRA matters.
It may matter to you, but I think legally it doesn't. We can't control everything with the historic overlay district, and it's been pretty much defined that it's what you can see from the public right of way. unless we're talking new construction.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm responding to a comment. Okay. All right. Okay. So next one is. Okay, so the next one is 3335, also on Elm Terrace, and you can see there, it looks like there's a large addition off the back. And so this would be one of those ones because it was a one-story Luria, and then there's a large addition, so the National Register saw it as kind of changing the massing and the shape and overwhelming the original home. But I can see how, obviously we can see the original structure right here. So thoughts on that one?
I'll jump in. I mean, I've struggled with this because I know there are a couple on Upper Holmes Run Drive that we said were contributing, that I think the addition far outweighed the original home. In this one, I feel like they actually did, I get it, this is a two-story addition, but I think, it's actually pretty well done how it's set back from the original house. It's set down from the original house, so the elevation's a little bit lower too. And of course, they have the benefit of, I guess, years of more landscaping. So I'll be honest, this house, I remember this one because when we did the historic registry, I was one of the people who surveyed and, for the report. And I remember struggling with this one, but, and I honestly can't tell you where I ended, but if you would ask me today, I sort of feel like it would contribute. But maybe that's just because there've been a lot of houses since then that really don't contribute. So
yeah, that changed much more than this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually
we've got a lot of houses in Homes and Acres that are 2 stories high, and this 2-story addition is totally in keeping with many other 2-story houses look like, and just the fact that it's an addition, I don't think disqualifies the house. But at first glance, this looks very much like Homes and Acres. Much more with a thin roof line and the slopes. And my objection is to those windows, but they're a little, what can you do? But the rest of it is perfectly fine.
I agree with Arvidas on this, and I was going to say, in comparison to the house we looked at before with the yellow door, one of the other things that really stands out with this is that the original delicacy of the house is evident, and it's evident in the addition by the thin, if you look at the thin fascia and the thin columns. Some of the houses that have had additions done recently in the neighborhood, they've gone to really oversized beams and some of that is, again, kind of dictated by additional insulation that we're required to have, but there are architectural ways to get around that to still minimize the profile, which again, I would hope the ARB would be able to help with. But I think that's what I respond to. There's a delicacy, there's a thinness to the edges of this, even in the addition, that to me still very much speak Homes on Acres.
Yeah. No, I think this is one of those ones that, I can understand because, you can definitely see the original house and the addition is offset. It's towards the back. And so, this is, I think it's, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I feel like, I think some of probably the frustration that sometimes we have in these meetings about what's contributing or non-contributing is because, like I said earlier, we're coming from, our profession where we have these standards and these very specific things that we're supposed to look for. And you all live in this community and it's your neighborhood and you want to preserve it, but you understand a little bit more of the wiggle room that should be allowed, obviously. So, and I think that's really important for us to take in and try to work in as best we can, since we are kind of bound by kind kind of our zoning regs for creating an HOD, but I think that it's important that, yeah, we talk about stuff like this, because I think that I can definitely see this one kind of going the opposite direction, so.
It actually, I walked past this every day for over a year before I even realized that addition was there.
Oh, really?
And then I had to look really hard at it because I think unconsciously I'd always just assumed it was the side of a gaddy.
Oh, okay.
That was
Yeah.
like back further and like it was a different house. And then I realized, oh wait, that's the same house. But like your eye is so drawn to the green paint and the windows on the other one that like it's so backgrounded. I would totally say that's contributing.
I have a question for the group. I agree with everything you just said. It looks like a tastefully done duplex rather than part of the same structure at first glance. However, I think no one really has objections to the house from the curb, but I wonder how much of that is because of the tree in front of it. If that tree were to go down, are there things that we notice that we might have problems with?
I don't think so. I really like the addition. I think you can in this picture you can see it pretty clearly, despite the tree, because the tree's kind of airy, and I still think that it fits right in.
I agree. I see it in the winter sometimes when the tree is not in leaf, and I just think the setback does a really good job of continuing the line of the roof and minimizing it a little bit. So, and the overhang of it keeps it in shadow, and it is a bit alarming to have the additional large brick, but I agree with Jenny that, what ends up happening is that brick wall kind of for a minute, unless you're really staring at it, you kind of think, oh, it's just another chimney mass of Holmes Run Acres, So in general, I agree with Arvidas that the windows are a little bit different, but otherwise it seems to me that it's a pretty sensitive addition.
Right. Next one up is, okay, so that was everything, all the other non-contributing, potential non-contributing. So we'll move to Executive Avenue. The first one is 3-6. This is one view. I think I have another picture. So obviously you can see some of the changes there, and National Register had it as the additions were unsympathetic to the dwelling, and also just kind of the vertical boards. And then the front additions, obviously we can see with the windows, which are very different than anything in Holmes Run Acres. So thoughts on this one?
I agree.
If I were on the review board, I would say go for it. This doesn't bother anything. It's very much in keeping with the spirit of the time when all our houses were built. And this window treatment is a lot less objectionable than some of the others we have seen.
I agree with Arvidas.
I agree too. I remember when this addition was done 30 years ago, and it was loudly recognized as something to be proud of. And the architect who did it and lived there was sort of a model in our community.
Yeah, the windows stand out to me as out of character, but I would definitely not say it's not contributing. It contributes.
Again, to me, it shows the delicacy, the way it's been treated. And I think it absolutely contributes. There's, I can't.
Absolutely done.
I think it is.
So I would vote it's contributing.
Okay. I will add that to my notes. Okay, so then the next one is 3318. That one. And then similar, National Register found it non-contributing. And obviously you can see the additions and the changes there. Let's see, I have one more photo to get a different. I think this one kind of shows it.
Can you show us the left side?
Let's see.
I mean, I'll jump in here again. I feel like this is within the wiggle room of, wanting to be able to have some flexibility for people's expression or whatever. And I find this it's still in the spirit of, and it's still, you can kind of recognize the Holmes Run house in here. And again, I think if I were to compare this against quote pure Luria, maybe I'd have a different opinion, but compared to some of the ones that we've said are contributing, this absolutely qualifies in my mind.
I agree with Edith. It certainly does. The element is different, but it's not out of keeping with the period. If we're looking at strictly appearance, yes, it's different. But if we're looking for conforming to the thinking of the day, then this definitely is not too bad.
Jenny, these are the only two pictures that I have, so I can't see further.
I think the left side looks more like, it's just that sorry, they're going nuts. It's just that the right side kind of got like overmasked. But I think the left side looks more like what you would expect. That being said, like I agree with Edith and Arvidas that like if they had an overhang on the front of it, it could have benefited from ARB review. Because that overhang on the front would have made a world of difference, but it still, yeah, it's definitely, you can tell that's a Holmes Run home.
I agree.
You got to keep in mind that there is no point in putting an overhang. I had nothing to do with this job, but there's no point in having an overhang over a bare wall. What is it overhanging? So they did it right. They put the overhang over the windows, but not over the wall.
Amen. I agree with Arvidas, and this is another example of, just the spirit of the overhang is there, and then they captured space without windows where they could, and I think they were probably trying to emulate a little bit the brick wall, the sort of. Sorry, I'm I'm tired today. My words aren't coming to me. But the
element is very much like a brick wall.
Correct, exactly. Thank you, Arvidas. That's what I was trying to say. The massing of a brick wall and then flanked by two windows. I think they were trying to emulate that a little bit. But again, the overhang is there, and the crispness of the fascia is there. So I think this contributes.
All right. So next up is also on executive 3321. Obviously, this is non-contributing in the National Register, and we agree with that one.
I agree, non-contributing. I think the
Holmes Run house is lost in that one.
It's complete. Yeah. You can see where the return of the eave is. That's a conventional detail, and it's too high. The massing is too high. So I think they're trying to keep the shape, but yeah, no, it's.
Whoever said it, the house was lost. This lost it.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
This was done after a fire, and they rebuilt the house essentially and built a 2-story addition on the back. There was nothing there. Well, there was something there, but not much.
Not much.
The kid left his shirt over a lamp. Next thing you know, there was no house.
That's
This is another one where I think cautionary tale about the ARB, or not cautionary, but benefit of the ARB, because I think if you went with this massing, even with the 2-story in the back, I think if you went to the ARB, they I mean, RV is, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like I could I could put some pen to pencil on this, or paper to pencil on this pretty quickly and bring it in line.
Oh, for sure. I agree with you. It could have been done a lot better.
Yeah, and I think even
You
that's,
know, they changed
yeah.
they changed the roof slope, but the reason for that, I'm sure, was because they wanted to use shingles, asphalt shingles on it, and or fiber shingles instead of our traditional roof. And in those days, you couldn't do it on a low slope,
Mm.
so they just changed it. But yeah, no, of course, it could have been a lot nicer.
Yeah, and I think to Ida's point, it for sure it's I think, yeah, hopefully if there is a HOD, the ARB would hopefully help kind of mitigate those things. So if somebody did have to start from scratch, the house would end up looking more in line with that. Okay.
I just trying to clarify, so the house we're looking at is not the original house. The original house is gone.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so once the original house is gone, is there any avenue to be contributing? I thought no.
No, no.
Okay.
And so I guess in my notes and in the National Register, we didn't have that information that it had burned down. We just had the permits for like additions and stuff. So, which is partly why we do this work group meeting, is to get more information that we may not be privy to, because we haven't lived in the community for at all. But so
I'm
yeah.
sure it was. I'm sure it was filed for building permit as a renovation addition, not a new house, because there, you know, practically everything, all the foundations and the wall area and everything was still there. The fire was not that destructive, but it was destructive enough.
And we saw that something similar in
The house there
Holland
when
Hills.
it happened.
Okay.
Right.
And then I know in Holland Hills we had something similar where a house had I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically only one original wall was left, and then they reconstructed it. But in the permits, it's not a whole new house; it's just additions, and so so yeah. Okay, so moving on. So we're gonna go to 3327 executive.
That's contributing.
Okay, so as we say, in the National Register, they said unsympathetic addition on the north elevation, which is I believe what you're looking at, and then covered by gable roof, which is normal, but the addition is clad in horizontal boards. There's also a shed roof addition on the west elevation. Oh, actually, that's the front there. Sorry. So I think, yeah. Obviously, I think you can still see a lot of the Holmes Acres house. My guess is starting with the National Register nomination, it was probably just, again, kind of a lot of additions and changes. They tend to get very specific with materials. And so I think that's part of the issue. But I can definitely see how it could be contributing to an HOD.
I see the house in here. I think this is definitely contributing. And I agree. I think that there were way more restrictions on the surveys conducted for the National Registry, because that truly was, you know, neighborhood, how much of it is still intact from the 50s. I think for the HOD, we're looking at something a little bit different. We recognize that they were built as starter homes and that there were going to be some changes to them. So I think this is a sympathetic series of additions.
I'd say it's contributing.
Agreed.
So this is 3402. I think to me, this one's fairly obvious why it's non-contributing. Again, no judgment on any of the additions or what they did, but obviously it's hard to see any part of the Holmes Acres home in there, especially with like large garage, how they connected it there. Yeah, thoughts?
I agree. It's non-contributing.
Yeah, I've always
Agreed.
thought it's
Agreed.
not contributing also.
I agree, but I really dig their deep porch.
Love a good porch.
Yeah.
All right. might be. Okay, that is, leave the rest of them for now. And so I'll take those notes. Yeah, so I'll take those to heart. And go back and look at some of the ones that you guys had some comments and disagreed about. So thank you for that. And so with that, let me. Oh, and we wanted to, Nancy had brought to my attention, she wanted to discuss 7700 Holmes Run Drive. So let me just pull up that real quick. This is one again that was considered non-contributing in the National Register nomination, and staff had agreed with. And when we go to Holmes Run Drive, we will look at that also. But since Nancy brought it up, I appreciate that, because we definitely want you guys to let us know if there are structures that you have thoughts about. Sorry, something in the chat there. So Nancy, okay, so let me pull this one up. And so Nancy, and this is your house, is that correct?
Where is that?
I'm sorry about that driveway. That's our next job.
Okay, so let me pull up.
Nancy, I'm going to tell you flat out, this is contributing in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I
Thanks, Edith.
totally dig the windows on the right. I've never seen this house, but is it like way up Holmes Run Drive at the top?
Jenny, you walk by it all the time. It's at the intersection of Holmes Run Drive.
Yeah, I see you walk by my house all the time.
Okay, I need to pay more attention, because I love the windows on the right. Almost remind me of a Craftsman, but I totally dig them.
Here,
No, it's definitely contributing us. I mean,
yeah, I
it's,
agree.
that's the way to do an addition.
I agree, and
I had
think
nothing to do with it.
I didn't either. I think we always have to give that caveat, don't we, Arvidas? I didn't have anything to do with it either, but I think we spent a lot of time looking at the other house that had the yellow door, that had a similar idea of a split roof at the entrance, and I think you can see how this one gets kind of an immediate reaction of contributing, where the other one we hemmed and hawed a little bit. And so I think it's a good study to look at the two of them and sort of to try to understand why our reaction was that way. But to take a stab at it, I think you can see the original chimney mass, you can see the original eaves and overhangs, and the massing of it is sort of in keeping. And then the elongated line, I think, works really well for this particular site. So to me, this is a flat out contributing house.
I think
there are at least 8 houses in the neighborhood that have that sort of split roof approach. So I don't know if it was common at the time with the designers that were doing that, but that's why I had a hard time with the one previously. Is I've seen this style on many Holmes Run Acre houses. So some are executed better than others, but I mean this split roof line is pretty common. When I say common, I've seen it enough times in the neighborhood to where I feel like it's part of Holmes Run. So I would say definitely yes on this one, and the one that we hem and hawed on, I still felt like it was contributing. It may not have been the best sort of implementation of this, but I feel like it's a Holmes Run Acres house. So.
Okay, that's on the corner. Yeah. I always see it from this view. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just going to say, getting back to the National Register, I think, starting with I'll zoom in just a little bit more. It's the amount of additions and kind of how much larger it made it, but I understand, I can see what you all are saying as well. So we'll relook at this one too.
I think there's another component. Again, the delicacy is here. It's, for quite a few additions for
Thank you.
Quite a larger home, you still maintain the scale. And I think that's really important, and that's done by sort of breaking down the masses and again keeping sort of the more delicate lines of the detailing. So it's not, Patrick, to your point, I don't think it's just a split is a split is a split. I think it's also kind of how it's detailed. Because that's, I mean, like it or not, the original homes had a particular detailing to them. Not all of it was simply because of materials. Some of it was, you know, a lot of it was architecturally driven as well.
Plus it's a corner lot.
Well, you know, actually, this house preserves the order of the house more than anything. Not, you know, it's different, but it certainly keeps the spirit of the original house, which was very orderly, modular, you know, symmetrical. It wasn't just wild every which old way. So I'd say it's contributing.
I agree completely.
Lost my screen. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, yeah. So I will add that to the list, and we'll go back and relook at it. And before obviously we make any final decisions, we'll let you guys know for sure. So, but yeah. So, and I really appreciate Nancy bringing that because there are some that through the process, you know, to us are very, you know, following the National Register, the criteria that we've developed. You know, if there are ones that you guys see when we're going through this, and again, that's why we're going to go through all of the streets again, just to identify those, to make sure that we're getting all the comments before we make any final decisions. So, okay. So with that, I will have Sarah Vonish, who is our consultant from EHT Traceries. So Sarah's been to the last few meetings, I believe, and kind of did the introduction to the design guidelines a few months ago. And so since she's been attending the meetings and listening in, her and her team have been working on creating the drafts for the design guidelines. And I do want to point out it's draft, it's early. So we're going to have Sarah do kind of the introduction to it today. And then I believe she will have it ready for us to send out to you guys, to the work group. And so you guys can go over it, pick through it. And again, kind of what we were talking about earlier is there's going to be a lot of detail in there. Probably that is, you know, we've talked about this before, I think. It might seem like a lot, but again, we're just kind of following our industry standards. And these are guidelines, so they are not going to be enforced by the zoning ordinance. It'll be the conversation that you have with the ARB. And we definitely want to get your guys' input on them at the draft stage, so we can kind of make sure we're hitting all the points that are important to the folks in the community. So with that, Sarah, do you want me to turn over presenter mode to you?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
So we will have the draft out to the work group probably at the end of this week or early next week. And then we'll come back to the next work group meeting and we can go through any questions or comments that you guys have. You can also provide any written comments to Nicole or Laura Arsenault, and we'd be happy to look at them and talk about them with you at the next work group. All right, so that's my whole screen. And I'm joined tonight by Catherine Wallace, who's also from Traceries and has been working on these design guidelines. So she's available for questions as well.
Real quick before you start, it has started storming where I'm at. So I live in Frederick, Maryland, so that
Okay.
like, yeah. So if I disappear, because I mean, like literally just like buckets are pouring down. So if I lose power or internet, I apologize. I will try to log back in with my phone. So just a warning. Laura's on here, so the meeting should continue to go. So.
All right, so this is just a reminder. We've gone through this slide before, but the purpose of the design guidelines to provide recommendations for treatment strategies that maintain, strengthen, and enhance the character of the HRA Holmes Run Acres community, to give historic background and practical guidance that will facilitate project applicants as well as the ARB as they review projects coming before them. It provides flexible guidance well aligned with preservation standards, mainly the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. They are not intended to stunt innovative design or preserve the neighborhood as a snapshot in time. They are also not meant to be absolute or give case-specific advice. They are recommendations and not requirements like the zoning. And of course, sometimes a creative, thoughtful, or necessary design solution that does not fit neatly within the design guidelines will be approved by the ARB. So our methodology, we reviewed a lot of the existing documentation that you guys have made available on your website, which was really helpful. We also performed additional research. We went out and surveyed the neighborhood and took photos of all the houses and the setting. We have been working with you and staff and coordinating the effort with our work updating the existing design guidelines for the 13 existing HODs. So again, this is just a first draft. We'll come back to you and take into consideration any comments or suggestions going forward. So the contents, starting with Chapter 1, provides an introduction to the district guidelines, including a overview of the HOD regulations and project review process, and then information on using these design guidelines. We're also preparing overall design guidelines for all of the Fairfax County Historic Overlay Districts, which will provide additional information on the ARB process and what materials are required. So it will be used in conjunction with that document. This just gives you an idea of the projects that do and do not require ARB review. I think Nicole's discussed this with you in the past, so I'm not going to read everything on there. So Chapter 2 talks about the history and significance of the potential HOD, and this really benefits both the homeowners and project applicants, whether they be architects or builders, because it provides just an overview of the significance and the character defining features within the community, and a timeline of the development within the neighborhood. So here's just some shots of the actual document and what you'll see in the next couple days. Talks about the subdivision and site development patterns. Again, the timeline provides a lot of historic images. And character defining features is actually in Chapter 3, I apologize. So then Chapter 3 gives you an overview of the HOD, including the future zoning that has not yet been determined, but will be included in the document. The HOD boundary, which will evolve as we go through this process. The resource inventory, as we've been discussing tonight, and then identifies those character defining features of both the buildings and the landscape. There are no known archaeological resources within the neighborhood, but we're keeping a consistent layout and for all the HODs. So information on what to do if you encounter an archaeological resource or think you might have the potential to encounter one. So here are some snapshots of the document. It goes through the different unit types within the neighborhood, and then again, all those character defining features with lots of pictures to help illustrate what's important and what needs to be preserved as part of any project. So then Chapter 4 really gets to the heart of the design guidelines. It outlines the preservation objectives of the guidelines, what they can and cannot do, gives you a summary of the standards for rehabilitation, which are the standards that the ARB uses in their review of projects, and then provides guidelines for preserving architectural character, including the preservation and rehabilitation of existing buildings, guidelines for architectural compatibility, which captures guidelines for new construction and additions, and then guidelines for preserving the setting of the community, including the landscape and topography and hardscape features. So here again are some snapshots. And here you can see the building elements that are included within the guidelines for preserving existing buildings, talking about foundations and the walls and foundations and roofs and the materials and essential forms that you see throughout the neighborhood. Again, same thing, and windows and details or lack of details and ornamentation, mechanical systems and how they should be installed in a manner that does not detract from the aesthetic and overall character of the neighborhood, as well as garages and carports, since those are such character defining features of these houses. And here are some pictures of the document. You can see there are lots of pictures to provide clear examples of what is recommended and what is not recommended as far as materials and addition of other features. For new additions and new construction, we talk about site design, size, scale, and massing, proportion and symmetry, as well as those building elements that I talked about earlier and the materials that characterize the community, and the best way to add an addition or new construction in a manner that fits within the character of the community. And here are some snapshots of pages from this section, roof forms that are found within the neighborhood that are recommended and not recommended. We also have a couple different examples of additions that have been made over the years, and why or why not an addition may be considered compatible and appropriate. You can see, I'm just going to talk about this since we've been talking about the contributing and non-contributing buildings. The first example has a rear addition that's really not visible from the street right of way, so is largely compatible and deferential to the historic original building. The second has a side a little bit larger of a side addition, but it's again compatible with the original building, and you can differentiate the new from the old, which is helpful and consistent with the standards. And then finally, you see a very tall addition, a couple additions that kind of overwhelm the original one-story building. So then again, for preserving setting, we talk about site design, setbacks, the angle of the building to the street, and just preserving the existing organization within the neighborhood. You have landscape design, and you have your mature trees, natural topography that we want to see retained and enhanced as future projects come forward. And then it discusses fencing and screening, driveways, and again, archaeology. And here are some images that help illustrate what is in the actual document. And then the appendix includes a glossary of terms and acronyms, additional resources, including links to the National Register nomination, links to various Fairfax County resources that might be useful, a maintenance checklist just with some best practices for maintaining some of the historic materials that we see in the neighborhood. And then in the future, it will be updated with the list of contributing and non-contributing resources, so it can be easily referenced for users when they're applying for considering future projects to their property. So that's all I have, and happy to go through any questions or return to any of these slides if you want me to.
How long are you giving us to look at this over and get back to you?
Well, I don't know when the next work group meeting is scheduled, if there is one scheduled, but I think you'll have it in the next couple of days, and then you can take your time to review and provide written comments, or else we can talk about it in the next work group meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll talk about scheduling it obviously at the end, but definitely have at least until the next work group meeting, so probably 4 weeks-ish to go over, because it is going to be fairly detailed, and we want to make sure that you guys have enough time to actually dig into it and look at all of it.
I was going to offer up to the Holmes Run Acres working group, if it helps at all. I imagine we are all vaccinated now. After we've all read through the document on our own, I'd be happy to host kind of a walk-through, read-through at my house if there's a way we can already address some of the issues, so that when we have our meeting with Nicole and Sarah et al., you know, we're better prepared to have questions and answers because we've discussed it amongst ourselves in Homes Run Acres.
Good idea. We could even meet at the park and pull the tables together and sit around.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody know when the cicadas are due to be gone?
Oh,
2 to 3
yeah.
more. 2 to 3
Not till the
more.
end of
Oh.
June, not till the end of June, I think.
Really?
Not till the end of June. Holy cow.
I know.
Oh,
I have to ask something as the anti-alternate here. When we first pitched this to the community, we were told, and we told them, that they would get to vote on this after they saw the guidelines. Recently, it's been mentioned that actually, no, there won't be a vote. The county will just kind of like decide whether they're going to implement it or not. I think that whether the county takes into account the vote or not, we need to give them the opportunity to vote on what they see.
Yes. So to touch on that, the whole vote thing is why we've always been kind of like, I'm not sure, is because generally when we do, and this is not just HODs, this is all like plan amendments, zoning changes. We have meetings like this or community meetings, and then also obviously planning commission and the board of supervisors where people can come and comment and let their wishes be known. And so, because again, as staff, if we're making a recommendation, it's our professional recommendation, which is separate, obviously, from what the community may or may not want. But Holland Hills, I believe, is going to do some kind of survey before, once the staff report. So once the report that includes, and this is a little bit down the road, obviously, for Homes Run Acres, right? So we'll include the background, all the work we've done with the work group, all of the determinations of contributing and non-contributing, what will go in the zoning ordinance, draft of the design guidelines. Once that's all done, and again, we'll release all of this. And once Sarah sends it to you all, and we'll put the presentation up on the website and send it to you guys so you can share it with everybody. This will all be released to the larger community too, to give them time to comment on it before it gets to the planning commission or the board of supervisors. And I believe, and Laura just popped on, that Holland Hills will be doing some sort of survey. And I think if they are able to do that, then we will follow suit with that, to get that community input, because while obviously you do have the opportunity to comment along the way and at the board of supervisors, planning commission, it sounds like it's very important to have a vote on whether or not you all agree with what ends up being the recommendation. So Laura, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the Holland Hills process. So in addition to a vote, we actually had the work group disagrees. They don't all agree on the support or opposition of the historical overlay district. So they're actually writing like a majority and minority opinion that will be included in the staff report as well. So that's the work group's kind of vote, if you will. So the work group will have an opportunity to vote. And then, as Nicole mentioned with the survey, their survey is going to be for the larger community once the staff report is finished, so they can take all of that into account and then vote on everything. The design guidelines are actually not technically what you're voting on at that point too, because they're approved by the Architectural Review Board. Although they are a contributing document. I know I'm probably confusing people, but it is an accompanying document that has to be done in order for the HOD to be adopted. So if there's still things outstanding and you support the historic overlay district in general, but you don't necessarily like 2 or 3 things in the design guidelines, there will be ample opportunities. I want to say like maybe 5 different times you'll be able to comment on the design guidelines and review them before they are finalized. So there's that as well.
Okay, so as long as not just us, the working group, but the community has plenty of opportunities to tell us, because I can't remember what meeting it was, but there was kind of a freak out there for a bit that like, wait, you mean you guys told us that we would get to vote on this, and so we all said yes to your little petition, and now it's completely out of our hands and we don't even. So as long as they have opportunity to give input and they feel that their voices are going to be heard, and if there's strong opposition that it's not going to pass, then I think we're okay.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't want to speak for the supervisors because obviously I have no idea what's in their head, but I would imagine this is a community driven effort, right? Like this didn't start just because Fairfax County wanted it to, it's because the community asked it to. So I think if the community has great opposition to it, they will take that very much into account before deciding whether or not to put any kind of new zoning restrictions and design guidelines on a neighborhood. So I think, yeah, and again, this is kind of newer territory. We haven't done new HODs in a long time, and these are new suburban HODs, which is very different than what we've done before. You know, usually like 1 or 2 properties and then nothing else. And so I think the supervisors and the planning commission will take all of that into account. And I just want to reiterate too, for us as staff, again, we're just tasked with looking at the historic side of it, right? Like we're just looking to figure out, is there historic significance? If there is, what's contributing and non-contributing? And then if there is a historic district, the potential for it, how do we put zoning regulations in place if necessary, and or what goes in the design guidelines? And then it'll come down to, yeah, the community saying yes or no, whether or not they want something like that. We're just recommending for a historic district or not. So just want to make sure that part is.
Can I just chime in because I started all this, so I want to be really clear. Because yes, as Jenny said, in the survey, we made it amply clear that this is a survey and that there would still be another opportunity after the whole process to go, whoa, or yay. So I want to understand 2 things. One, sounds like, and I get Laura's comment about the design guidelines, that it's probably not beneficial to anybody to put those out to the public right now until they're further vetted and tightened, and until they're an actual, you know, document that we've reviewed. So I understand that. And I guess I'm just still, and maybe you've said it and I just lost track somehow in the conversation about it, but once we review the design guidelines internally, I mean the working group, and then ostensibly we go back to you with our comments on that, at what point, or is there a point when we can share that with the community? And is that up to us, or will that be another community meeting that the county will hold, much like the one we had in March?
Yes. So yeah, so after you guys vet it, and again, like this is just like the first iteration of the draft design guidelines. So once we get your guys' comments back, Sarah and her team will work on that. And then they'll come back to the work group and discuss that more. Yes, once we get to a point where it feels like we've got what we think are the important parts of the design guidelines, and also I think the staff report, we'll have the design guidelines, I think, because I think Laura, you've released the Holland Hills ones already to the larger community. Once we have them in good shape, yes, there will be another community meeting, and it will have the draft zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan amendment, and also the draft design guidelines. So then, and then give the community a while to look at them, comment on them, and we can take all that into account too. So yeah, they'll have time to comment on all the documents as well.
And so if the community comes back, because in order for us to gauge interest, we can't just go by loudest voice. We have to kind of either roll out a survey or something like that. So when would be the appropriate time, I guess, to roll out another survey to the whole community to just see if people who were on board are still on board, if other people have changed their minds, maybe new people have moved in and are like, what the heck? And just really get a sense of where the community is again, much like the initial survey that we did to gauge interest in pursuing this in the first place, which was obviously clear majority overwhelming. Like,
Laura,
next time?
When is, like, do you have your kind of like where you're placing the survey?
Can I ask a question? What exactly would we be voting on? I mean, can the community vote on the design guidelines?
I think the thing to do,
that is impossible.
No,
Totally impossible.
No, Arvita,
it's like voting on a dictionary.
No, not design on the guidelines, but design on, given the guidelines, are people still on board with pursuing an HOD?
Right.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think the challenge here is that like, the comms around this need to be like pretty careful, and that we deliver to them the document, that the consulting firm is creating, and we like give another clear explanation of like what's the ARB, what's the process going to look like, what's subject to design review and what is not, etc. But then also say like, because people are going to get bogged down in the details and they'll like oppose it because, oh, it's too detailed, and they won't understand like, no, we're not, this is not like a rule book, right? So like we need to be very clear in the comms on it. But then I think if you run a survey and say, you know, like, given the guidelines that we presented to you, are you for or against an HOD? And then we ask them, what do you like the most about it? What do you like the least about it, right? And give them opportunity to give us a little bit of feedback to see if, you know, oh, we've got 80% oppose it, but it's because of this one thing that's in there, right? Then we can make adjustments and do it again. So I think that kind of survey that's really short, but gives people an opportunity to say, I support versus I oppose, and then a, you know, space to tell us, what do you support or oppose? That would be really helpful.
So the thought with Holland Hills was to do the survey once the staff report was published, so that you had all the information in front of you and it was vetted. So that's good and bad, because once a staff report is published, you know, that's staff's recommendation. But once again, the design guidelines will not be finalized by the Board of Supervisors. They're finalized and approved by the Architectural Review Board. So I think with Holland Hills, we determined we're not starting our survey, our final kind of litmus survey, if you will, until the staff report is published. We're actually publishing the staff report, I think, 4 weeks early instead of the normal 2 weeks early, so that we have ample time to get the survey in and response in. And then that allows the supervisor's office and the planning commissioner to take in the survey results when they go to the planning commission and the board of supervisors. So the thought was, yes, we will be accepting feedback on the design guidelines from now until whenever the ARB approves it. Whenever the ARB looks at it, which would be after the HOD was approved, if it's approved. So there's going to be ample time. We haven't even, and I know Nicole's told you this a couple times, is that we're at the very beginning of all this, and we haven't even kind of presented you the administrative side of the zoning ordinance amendment, the comprehensive plan amendment, and the rezoning pieces that all have to go in this and be presented to you. So we are nowhere near kind of finalizing any of those documents, and the design guidelines that you'll see later this week are really just the first pass. I will tell you from Holland Hills that, you know, they came back and said, you know, and I think Sarah Vonish knows this, is door color was an issue, or mailbox, are you regulating our mailbox and type and style and that type of thing. And that's something that we're working on. There was even discussion about how the photos were recommended and not recommended for treatment. So that's all stuff that's open for conversation. But I think there's a point to say that we want to have it vetted by you all before we release it to the wider public, because then you start getting Holland Hills has 490 properties, so 300 and some odd properties of people's comments on this.
I think the important thing in this community is that we let them look at the guidelines and vote on it before it's officially an HOD.
Right. So yeah, let me just interject on that. So otherwise, like people are going to hate us. Yes. And they're going to be really mad at government for lying to us and saying that, hey, yes, we want this, but we'll let you vote. And then government just like seized it out of our hands. Like they're going to have a say before it becomes an official HOD.
Yeah, and that's what will happen. And that's what Laura was saying, is like, once, again, we'll release all the draft guidelines and stuff to everybody before we even get close to the vote. But then once the staff report is completed with the zoning ordinance and the still draft design guidelines, then the survey will happen. So everybody will have all the information, and there will have been a community meeting presenting that information. And so that will give folks the time to comment, because no, totally agree. Like that would be very troublesome.
So can I just tap oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just had a question. I guess it's in the order of things of how these happen. So we've heard the discussion about, you know, yeah, we'll have opportunity to review and stuff like that. But I think what it really comes down to is we have to be able to provide you with the results of the survey before you make a recommendation, not after you make a recommendation. So I want to make sure that we don't have a disconnect on timelines between when you make a recommendation versus when we're able to actually get feedback from the community. Because I don't think your staff should make a recommendation without that survey. So I just want to clarify or question the order of things that are happening.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to do that after the fact.
So again, the
I
problem.
was just going to interject. Sorry, Nicole, I was just going to interject because I'm on board with what Patrick's saying. It would be super helpful, since we're having this discussion, to just do a rough timeline so we can get through the order. Because I have, number one, the working group reviews the draft design guidelines. I'll be honest, after that, I'm really confused.
I was just going to say that, if you could draw up for us and just email us a timeline, then I think we can say, oh, this is where the survey needs to go. And
Okay.
then just space that out a little bit and make sure we get it.
Yeah.
The other reason for that is that rolling out that survey was a colossal effort that involved getting a lot of people on board. It wasn't so much, printing the survey is an easy thing, or signing up SurveyMonkey, also an easy thing, but it's going back to people over and over and over again to make sure that because a lot of people are going to take that survey right off the bat, maybe even 30 or 40 or 50% of the neighborhood. But a lot of people are going to put it on the back burner, and until they're nagged 100 times, are not going to take that survey. We went door to door to every single home in Holmes Run Acres to make sure that every single person had the opportunity to look at this and vote. Because we wanted to make sure it wasn't lost via email or lost in a pile or whatever. So that rollout took an intense amount of work to organize and to execute. We're going to need some time. So the other reason to have this timeline with some really rough dates assigned to it would be so that we can start to think about, who we're getting on board to do that and when best to do that.
Yeah. What I was going to touch back to what Patrick was saying. So again, the recommendations that staff will be making are basically whether or not there is historic significance and there could potentially be an HOD. It's not so much that we're saying, yes, you should have an HOD. It's more like, yes, there is. It's this weird, I think this is kind of the problem with this whole system is, yeah, we're just tasked with the historic part of it, which I think is obviously problematic because that's not the only thing that matters to the community, right? Like the history is important. However, what regulations and guidelines come from that is also important. And so I don't know, Laura, if you want to touch on if there's an opportunity to put the survey earlier. And I think also with Holland Hills, I think supervisor's office is going to do the survey. Is that correct? So it may be that you guys don't have to do it, and that way it's coming from the supervisor, not from the civic association, which hopefully pulls you guys out of that, and it's not on you for how it happens or what the questions are or chasing people down.
So on Nicole's point, there's a couple pieces of the pie in place, right? So Heritage Resource staff is making the recommendation, the work group is making their recommendation, and they don't necessarily have to agree on 100% of the fronts. Like with Holland Hills right now, we don't necessarily agree on all the contributing and non-contributing structures. It's just, we're just not going to agree, and that's understood. So we give one piece of the pie, the community gives another piece of the pie, and then the supervisor determines how those come into play and how to mitigate that. So that's why it's really the Board of Supervisors' final decision on whether it gets adopted, because we're providing the professional historic expertise. You guys are providing the day-to-day community input and property owner stakeholder piece. And then the supervisor will say, okay, the community does not want this, even though we think it's historic, then we're not going to pass it. Or we think it's historic, the community majority wants this, and then they'll make their decision from there. So it's really, we don't necessarily, so for Holland Hills, I'm sorry to keep going back to Holland Hills, but that's what most of my experience is with. But the work group is providing their own opinion to this point and making their own kind of vote, if you will. And then it comes to the supervisor figuring out, does the community support it? Does the community against it? The reason we're having a survey in Holland Hills is there's 450 properties. So there's no way you're going to reach a consensus. So there's a threshold for support or opposition that the supervisor is going to find to say, if there's this much support, then I think we can pass it. But if it doesn't meet that threshold, then we're not going to pass it. So there's probably like 30 moving pieces that would be submitted to the supervisor for consideration of this historic overlay district. And community support is one, staff's recommendation is another, other factors. But I do agree that the survey is a really important piece of this. And to Nicole's point, for Holland Hills, the supervisor requested it specifically. If the community wanted to do their own survey, that's up to you all if you decide that you want to go ahead and do that. But if you don't, I mean, that's another piece. But I think to the point of providing you a schedule, we can definitely do that. We can give you kind of a template of what we've done for Holland Hills, just because it's a little bit further on in the process. But I will say, since we don't have public hearing dates set up yet, because we're not that far enough to put all the analysis together for the staff report, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to give you like exact hearing dates. So we'll probably give you 3 months out, 6 months out, you know, that type of thing. To
right. We just need, I think we just really just need the order of things, because we know that the dates are going to change. So we need the order of things. And I will throw out there that there's obviously concern, you know, like in, I'll just call it due process concerns of if you all recommend, for example, and the Board of Supervisors goes, yeah, this is a great idea, for whatever reasons they decide it's a great idea, you've got 2 against 1, which is the neighborhood. And so that's why we're going to probably continue to foot stomp on the fact that we need to influence your decision or recommendation. I mean, I get your role, like, okay, yeah, this is good, bad, indifferent, or meets the objective. But at the end of the day, when you end up with 2 organizations against 1 organization, guess what happens? So hypothetically, if the neighborhood goes, wow, this is too stringent, we weren't expecting this, you know, whatever happens, you've got two parts of the triad moving in a direction that then overwhelms the neighborhood. So I just want to make sure that we have that sort of clear timeline of how things are working so that we can interject properly.
So Patrick, as I understood it, the 2 of them are not going to gang up against us. They're going to look at the majority or not majority of the community that supports it. And if a majority oppose, like, it doesn't pass whoever likes it. So I think that we will get, and it's just a question of then like raw numbers. Is it like 49% oppose and 51% approve? Like that's where it could get a little hairy if we have an issue like that. But that's where I think having this timeline is going to help, because if we need 2 surveys, like if the supervisor needs 1 that just says like percent oppose, percent approve, like that's one thing. But I think we also have got to have those open-ended questions that say like, what is it about this thing that you just absolutely hate or think should not be in there? And if we have that, then I think that will help us inform any adjustments that need to be made for everyone to be more comfortable with it, so you don't get a 49-51 split.
Yeah. And real quick, I was going to say, no, I totally agree, because I think that, and again, I don't think that the supervisors, because again, this is very new to all of them too, right? And I don't think that normally they are all just like gung-ho about putting restrictions on property rights. And so I think if the community is showing that they're not in favor of it for whatever reason, that is going to probably be a bigger and more important thing than if staff says, we think there's a historic district here. And I also wanted to say to Patrick's point, like, well, I totally, like, I appreciate it and understand that there will be concerns and people will not want this. Unfortunately, from my perspective and staff's perspective, like, I'm only tasked with talking about the historic stuff in the staff report. I can't say, as much as I like know you guys, and I'll know you guys through this video screen, as much as I know you all, and I totally understand it, and the consequences that a historic district could have on you, I can't put my opinions about that into the staff report. But if it makes you feel any better, I think people's opinions matter more than historic resources in Fairfax County. So I'll just say that. So I think that if the community is not happy with what the recommendations are, I do believe that the Board of Supervisors, and this is my opinion, will go with the community, right? Because there's no benefit to them to go against a group of residents and taxpayers that are really upset about new zoning regulations or new design guidelines. So yeah, as much as I appreciate it and understand. Yeah.
I just wanted to chime in. I'm apologize. I might be breaking up because you all are breaking up, but I moved in my house. That could be the culprit. I'm not sure. I was just going to say that again, as the leader of this whole effort, I made it very clear that I was only interested in pursuing this if I had a clear majority backing of the neighborhood behind me. So I think that if it came to, the neighborhood up in arms and saying we absolutely just cannot adopt this, I don't see that happening. But if it came to that, then, I hope I would have the support of the working group to say, well, guess what? We're going to write a letter as the working group of Homes Run Acres and say, look, we started this, we got a clear majority, but the sentiments have changed in the neighborhood and we can no longer pursue this. And I would hope that that would have some resonance with the supervisor.
I would say at any point, because you all started this, if you decided for whatever reason you wanted to stop it and petition to the supervisor, I don't see a reason to go forward, right? Like if we decided there was just, we can't agree on the design guidelines or we can't agree on the language, for example, Holland Hills fences is an issue. If we can't agree on the language on that, then we would stop where we are, either try to resolve it or just say, we can't, right? Like it's not, Nicole and I have thousands of other things, we have in our queue, and not that this is not important, but our directive comes from the supervisor. And if the supervisor says we're no longer working on this project, then we will switch gears. And to your point, Edith, is that there's a huge difference in getting authorization to do the research, background, and analysis of it, and then getting it approved. And so while people may be supportive of, the fact-finding mission and the process behind it and what it may come of it, once it comes out and you see the design guidelines, if that's not something, you support, and as Nicole said, the community speaks louder than we do, than staff does. So
I think all we're trying to do with the timeline is just establish that there is a place. We have to do due diligence. And again, as somebody who stuck my finger in the pie in the first place and said, hey, community, let's pursue this because, we're starting to see the domino effect of houses being torn down. I take it personally that I need to honor my word on this. And we made it very clear that we were going to pursue the survey. And then depending on what we find, we will, go back out to the community and say, okay, here's what the survey found. We're eligible, there's merit. This is what the guidelines would look like. This is how it might impact zoning. Here are the criteria. And we need the community to weigh in again. Now that you know all this, are you still on board? And I think what we're all trying to say, Jenny and Patrick and myself, is where in our timeline is that community input? Where does that fall so that we can anticipate it, moving forward?
Yeah, no, that's totally reasonable. And we'll make that timeline and kind of like Laura said, configure it kind of the process that it went with Holland Hills. And so we'll make sure that happens and gets that out to you. So I don't think any of us disagree with that at all, because I think that we know it doesn't work unless the community supports it. So otherwise, then all the work we've done is for naught.
Just to add a little humor to it, I think it's because Edith is scared of some ZMod.
I'm more scared actually I'm more scared that ZMod is going to make it that much more important to do the HOD, but yes. I just want to still be able to lift a beer. I still want to be able to host Oktoberfest and have people, we had 200 and almost 50 people last time, so we want to make sure we can still host it. And we have tomatoes thrown in. I want to just add, Laura and Nicole and Sarah, that I hugely appreciate your effort, because you're a little bit in an untenable position of being like the whack-a-mole that people and I think I just want you to know that I appreciate all the effort that you're putting into this on both Holland Hills, because that's important to us also, frankly, because it preserves another mid-century modern community. So important. You know, we were really happy when they got their historic registry, because it kind of gave us strength in numbers. So but yeah, I mean, the development pressures haven't gone away, and they've only gotten maybe hotter. So I appreciate the effort on this, and you know, I'm hoping the community will still support it.
Also, because this neighborhood is probably exceptionally opinionated. I mean, I don't know how docile Holland Hills is, but I know we're not easy. So
Yeah, and
here's to you.
And as you should be, right? It's your home, it's your property. It's you know, I would probably have very similar opinions if it was me. So I totally understand it and appreciate it completely. So
Jennifer, are you kidding? Holland Hills is a lot more opinionated than we are.
I'm not saying anything.
Nothing. Yeah, no comments here.
No comment.
I know they are.
All right. Well, thank you. So, so I will have Sarah from Traceries send me the presentation. Oh my God, your dog is adorable. And I will send that out to all of you guys. And then once she has the draft for the design guidelines, we will send that out to you also. And you guys will figure out the timeline for that commenting, and then also otherwise. So the other thing is there is some updates on staffing. I am going to be leaving Fairfax County at the end of this month, so which is not that far away. So Laura will be grabbing the torch for a little bit. They're actually in the process of hiring some other people, so hopefully there won't be a big gap. And we've been talking with the supervisor's office to try to figure out where we are, what the next steps are to make sure that we continue moving this forward. So just want to let you guys know about that. So after this week, if you have questions or concerns, Laura will be your contact, not me. But I'll send out an email with her contact information so that you have it. And I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. I'm bummed that I don't get to continue on because I love your neighborhood, and I think there's so much good stuff there. And I've really appreciated the conversations and discussions and just everything that you guys have put into this. So I just wanted to say that.
And
Well,
kind of on a, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thanks. I'm sorry to see you leave. I hope it's for brighter, greener, less built environments and horizons.
There might be some travel in my future. So, you know, like everybody, it's been a long year and a half. So I
get it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, we appreciate everything that you've done up to this point. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. You guys have been great. So I really do appreciate the conversations, and I really do like working with communities because, like, even today, like we've heard things that we didn't know because we didn't live in the community for 30 years, and that's the kind of information that I love to get, and I really appreciate that.
Best of luck to you and on your journey.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, guys. So yeah, so obviously Laura's on the call, so she knows about working on a timeline and figuring out, which is actually great because since she's been doing Holland Hills, she knows better the process that it's going to go through. So, but yeah, so we'll send out the presentation for the design guidelines just so you guys have that, and we'll put that on the website so everybody can see that. And I'll send you Laura's contact information to you guys, and so everybody has that. But other than that, there was actually real quick, there was somebody, Stephanie, I don't know if you're still paying or if you're still on the call. We had a visitor, and I just wanted to give you a chance to, if you had any questions or comments, you're unmuted.
Oh, no, thanks. Yeah, no, I didn't know I was, I know I was permanently muted. Yeah, so I was just trying to make some additional comments throughout the process, but I can get with the work group separately and make sure that I understand in terms of, you know, what are our, as Homes Run Acres, kind of our perspectives. You know, I've heard things about you know, can you see the original house versus the architectural lines, whether they were the intent and architectural lines of the original or just the original house? And some of those things I just had questions on during the process, but I can talk to the work group separately or reach out so I understand a little bit more of what they've done to date and how they're thinking about the perspectives of what they think as a group as what's important and what their criteria is. That was my thank you.
And
for
a lot of
addressing
yeah, thank you for popping in. A lot of all of the meetings, I'm sure nobody wants to go back and watch all of them, but they're all online on our websites. If you go to Fairfax County and search Holmes Run Acres, it'll pop up. So all the documents are also there too. So if there's things like the background or meeting summaries, those are all there. So you can look at those too.
Okay,
all
thank
right. Well, yeah. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Oh, Laura has one more thing.
Just wanted to give some expectations moving forward because I know Nicole's bombshell of leaving. We're trying to kind of grapple with that. So the goal is to give you all the design guidelines and then to meet hopefully on June 23rd. That would be the 3rd or 4th Wednesday in June, trying to look at that date to give you some time to grapple with that. And then after that, staff needs to go back and start doing the internal review. So sending it through all of our internal agencies, transportation, and if anybody else has comments, public park authority, schools, things like that. So we might not be having the work group meeting for a month or two. And then also in that dual purpose to be able to get someone on board to kind of bring them up to speed on Holmes Run Acres and myself, and we'll be tag teaming it with our new planner for a couple months, but just wanted to let you know we might have a gap after June. I'll know more at the June meeting and give you an update then, but we might have a little bit of a summer break and probably won't meet again until September. But just wanted to put you all on notice for that as we kind of deal with kind of the change of reins here and coming up to speed. But rest assured, we've worked with the supervisor's office and Nicole to kind of make sure the project stays on track and that we're still working on it in the meantime. So, but yeah, if any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and we'll move forward from there.
I have a quick question, actually for Nicole and for Laura. We have our website up and running now. I've started to move people towards the website so that I don't get as many emails of questions, but just, and not because I don't want to answer them, but just it's easier for me to maintain one area of updates than multiple different people asking me questions. So to that end, normally after one of our working group meetings, such as tonight's, I'll ask our website coordinator to post a little update, and if there's any pertinent information or documents or whatever, and just say, hey, the video is online, that kind of thing. What updates are you comfortable with me sharing at this point? So for example, the fact that we internally on the working group are working on the guidelines, because that's something that we can't share with the broader community now for obvious reasons, because it would just be too cumbersome to make that a design by 350 person committee. Do we just keep that quiet until we're ready to publish that? And, I mean, obviously, if anybody listens to this video, they'll know that we're going to be getting the guidelines soon. So, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what kind of updates could we give. I mean, I can wordsmith a change of reins that I can do. And I understand that there might be a summer hiatus, and that's normal regardless of the reason. But it sounds to me like our last meeting might be June until September. Like the last time we meet as a working group with the county might be June. And then we probably wouldn't meet again until September. And that's not because nothing's happening. It's because a lot of things are happening. So maybe what I'll do is just mention that I guess the video will probably be online in a couple of days, or.
Yeah, it should be online by Friday. It usually takes me a day or so to download it and get it to the people to upload it.
Okay, and then if you send me just Laura, your information, I can just pop that in there as the new contact so that we take Nicole's name off and put Laura's up. And then I'll mention that our next working group meeting is in June. And then we'll take a summer hiatus and return in September. And if we have a timeline before that, if there's or whenever you get it to me, I'd be happy to post that up on our website as well, because I think we had some stuff internally going on that the website wasn't, it needed some cleaning up. That was just on me. I had to kind of go back through and get rid of some of the old stuff and just kind of bring it up to speed. So it was useful for people who've just moved into the neighborhood, as well as for people who were trying to get a kind of bit of history on it. So I've done that, which is great. And now I'm just trying to stay current with it. But I have noticed that if I don't post anything, after like for 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of people get antsy. And then I start getting a bunch of emails, which completely kind of diminishes the whole purpose of having the website in the first place. So I just want to make sure that we're giving periodic updates. And it looks to me like we can already give the June hiatus September update and the switch from you, Nicole, to Laura update. But if we get that timeline, that'd be great. And anything else that you think of, if there's any kind of document. I mean, I could say, the working group is reviewing the guidelines, and
yeah, I think
Holland Hills or something.
Yeah, I think it's fine to say that you guys are looking at draft design guidelines, and I think, and Laura maybe can comment on this. I think it's fine because we'll probably put them even as a draft maybe up, I don't know, on the website, because we don't want to do this in a vacuum.
Right.
We don't want to send it out to everybody and present it as a final, because that is where it will get confusing. And, but
Right.
if there are people that are interested and they want to look at that and give us comments early, that is completely okay. Like
Oh, because I would love that.
I would
love that.
I would echo that, Nicole. I just think the issue is right now, and Sarah Vanish is probably going to kick us later, but the issue is right now is how many voices do we have commenting on it, the draft, right? The initial draft. So we really want to give you all the opportunity. So maybe we publish it after the June meeting where we can get comments and some edits done. Maybe the second draft we can publish. I don't want to stop you from getting people's input and comments, because as Nicole said, the earlier the better. And, we'd like to have those comments, but I just think we don't want to have, 80 people's comments on the initial guidelines and they're going to change again.
No, I think it's completely fair. I think that we can look at it internally with the work group. I think I actually think that's, it's kind of the only way to grapple with documents this big is to kind of have a smaller group and then open it up so that we know what's going on when we start getting questions. We've had a chance to kind of digest it and hash it out. So I think that's totally legit. So maybe what I can say.
There will be multiple iterations again, so it's
So
better to
maybe
have your eyes on it first and your feedback before everyone else gets to see it.
But
Maybe what I can say is that the working group will be reviewing a very rough draft of the guidelines that we will publish in draft form after our June meeting.
Yes, yeah, and we'll get the presentation that Sarah gave tonight up so they can kind of get an introduction to it. So and we'll give that to you guys too, so you can post that on your website as well. So hopefully that'll kind of lead them into hopefully what they'll get in June.
Great, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions or thoughts before we go? Great. Well, thanks again, you guys. Good luck, and can't wait to see what happens. Oh,
bye, Nicole.
Bye. Oh, bye, Elise. It's true. I actually got to see Elise in person yesterday. But thanks, Edith. Bye. Nice to see your face.
Thank you. You've been in the trend. I appreciate it. I'm remembering already your coming out masked, walking through the community when COVID was still pretty scary. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was funny. I randomly ran into you in your cul-de-sac, and I was like, oh, hey, I knew Edith. All right, bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Bye, thank you.